In this episode, we will be building the context menu that appears when you right-click on an item in your inventory. We will also be setting up what happens when you double-click on an item in the inventory, as well as what happens when you select the Use, Equip, or View option from the context menu that we build. And welcome back to the channel, everybody. Alright, so if you've been following along with the tutorial series, at this point your inventory should look something like mine. You can hover over it, you can click on it. If I come over to our various objects, I can collect all of them like so. We can swap all of these objects like so and move them around our inventory. In fact, I'm really quickly just going to change the icon for the key because that's going to bug me. Alright, so let's go ahead and do that again. I'm going to grab this, and there we go. So now that we have three different types of items, we have a consumable item, an equipable item, and a note. So our goal is that by double-clicking or right-clicking something, all of this is going to change. When we double-click the note should reappear in our hand, just like this. When we double-click the key, the note will appear in our other hand, in our right hand, if you will, and we will be able to use it to unlock doors. And then, of course, if we double-click or right-click use the item, we will consume it, and it will do something to our player. So let's go ahead and get started on that. So to get started, we are going to be in our inventory controller for just about all of this tutorial video, which makes it very easy. This will be a rather code-heavy video, but I will do my best at explaining everything we're doing and why we are doing it. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create a context menu that shows up when we right-click. And a context menu, and I think I demoed this before, a context menu is, I believe Godot calls them pop-up menus. But if you right-click on something and all of this information, all these options show up on the right side of it, that's the context menu, right? So that right there. And so essentially we're just going to create this, but with only two options. We're either going to use the item or we're going to drop the item. So let's go ahead and do that. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to create an onReady variable. We are going to call this the context menu. And this is of a type, I believe Godot has them as pop-up. Yeah, pop-up menu. And this is just equal to popup menu.new. Now, if you are doing a stylized game, you are absolutely going to want to go and create like a 2D, I believe, pop-up menu like this. You are going to want to do your design. You're going to want to have all your themes and whatnot. But once again, this is the demo to kind of demonstrate the functionality. I will let you guys design it as you wish. So this is just going to give us the default Godot pop-up menu, which will work fine. And so with that, we're just going to set up some signals. So if we come down here, after we've done all of our item slots set up, but still in the ready function, we want to add the pop-up menu as a child. So go ahead and add the context menu here as a child, and this will be put on the inventory UI. So if I go to my inventory controller, it will be a child of this control node, which is what we want. And so we're just going to have to connect context menu.connect. And we are going to connect its ID underscore pressed with a new function we're going to write, so a callable. Self means that that callable is in this class, and we are going to name that function on context menu selected. So obviously we need to write that function. So directly below the on item right clicked, we're going to write function on context menu selected. This is going to take in an ID that is an integer and return a void. And we're just going to write return for now. I'm going to hit enter a bunch to give me some space. And I just want to highlight these two functions right here. So I'm going to go ahead and add an underscore there just to kind of get rid of it. So on item right clicked and on context menu selected are the two functions we want to focus on right now. On item right clicked will fire when we right click on a slot. That will pop up the pop-up menu, the context menu, and then the context menu here, whenever we click on something like copy, will fire. So we have on item right clicked, on context menu selected. So those are the two actions. I'll do that one more time. On item right clicked, on context menu selected. So that's what we're going to be doing. The difference is we will be doing it here in our inventory. So the first thing we need to do is actually go through our on item right clicked function and kind of determine what slot we're clicking on and what the options should be. So let's go ahead and do that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set variable slot. This is of type inventory slot. So we're going to find the correct slot, and this is going to be equal to the inventory underscore slots at the slot ID. So remember, this gets fired when a right click like actually happens. And so now we're just getting the slot data for that right click. And so the first thing we want to do is we want to check if the slot.slot data is null, meaning there's nothing in the slot. If that's the case, we just want to return. We don't want to build the context menu. In reality, this will probably never hit because we are checking that here in the GUI input, which also fires this. But I'm not afraid to put in redundant if checks. I think it's always good to have null checks like this. So now we are right-clicking on an inventory slot that definitely has an item. Let's do something. The first thing we're going to do is clear the context menu. And the reason for this is we are going to have different options for the different types of items. So if I go ahead and let's go ahead and run the game. If I grab all three of my items here, when I right-click on the note, my options will be to view the note, meaning it will go back into my hand or it will drop. The consumable will be either use or drop, and then the key will be equip or drop. So those first options for all of these are going to be a little different. So we want to make sure that the context menu is specific to the option we're clicking on. So now that we're going to go ahead and match, and this is going to be a new function we're about to write, but I'll write this first. We're going to say get item action type, and it's going to call the slot it's going to send, the slot data. And this will tell us the action type. So down here below the context menu, let's go ahead and create that function. So we'll say function get this action type, and then we're going to have the item data, which is of type item data. And this is going to return our action data dot action type. So if you don't remember what this is, we created this action data resource where we have consumable, equipable, and inspectable objects. Each object will have one of these types, and we're going to return what that type is. So if we go back to our inventory controller here, we are going to check if the item data that we sent to this, the slot data that we sent to this, is null, or the item data does not have an item model prefab. Then we are going to return action data dot action type dot invalid. Now, in reality, this should never be invalid. Any item you set up will pretty much have to have a type, but this is always a good check. And what you could do is you could set up all of them by default to have an invalid type until you set them. But otherwise, if we have an item data and we have the item model prefab, the item model prefab and the item data is all we need to get the type. So all we say is return item data dot action data dot action type. And so now that we know the action type, we can go ahead and match these values. So we're just going to go ahead and indent this. And we have three different object types so far. So we're going to say action data dot action type dot consumable, and that will do something, and we'll just say return for now. And of course, we will need blocks for the other two types. So we have a consumable, we have an equipable, and of course we have an inspectable. And so now we just kind of need to build the context menu. So if it is a consumable, we are either going to use or we are going to drop the item. So we're going to take the context menu and we're just going to say add item, because that's all it is. It's just one singular option. This is going to say use, and then that is going to be option 0, which means it's going to be the first one that displays. And then, of course, the other option for this is going to be drop, which will be option 1. And so I'm going to go ahead and copy both those lines and put them in the equipable and adjust their indent. So in equipable, we can't use it. However, we want to put it in our hand. So we're going to say equip. And then we also have our inspectable. So we're going to go ahead and change this. And I think I had this at inspect at one point, but I'm just going to write view like this. All right, so at this point, our context menu has some values. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our context menu. we are going to call set meta, which is going to set the metadata on this context menu. We are going to set the slot ID to slot ID. And now all we need to do is get the mouse position and set that when we open up the context menu. So the way we're going to do that is by calling var mouse position. I believe this is a vector 2. Let me go ahead and write that out and we'll figure it out together. This is a vector 2, I believe. So we're going to go ahead and get the viewport, and then we're going to get the mouse position. Now, is that a vector 2? I think it is. I think it would have given me an error. And then we're going to create a variable rect, which is going to be a rect2i because we're going to be using integers. And this is going to be mouse position dot floor, and then a vector 2i of 1, 1. And I'll explain all this as we're going. And then finally, we're going to take the context menu, and we are going to call Popup, which is going to show it to us, and we're going to show the rectangle that we just built. It is of rect2i equals rect2i. All right, so what have we done? We have right-clicked on a slot. We have figured out what the item type is in that slot. And then this block of code, it finds where the mouse is, and it builds our context menu next to it. So that's a lot easier to explain after having this all written. So for instance, if you see my cursor up here by grid container, if I right-click on the left side of grid container, you can see that it spawns just to the bottom right of my cursor. And then if I move it all the way over here to the right, it still spawns on the bottom right of my cursor. So we are just finding where the mouse is on this given slot and making sure that that box always spawns right by it. And this rect2i is literally just rectangle of 2 integers that defines where and the size of the box. All right, so at this point, we should be able to test this, and we should be able to see a context menu appear. So let's go ahead and click on this and right-click. So you can see the little context menu appears there, but we don't have any options, so something's wrong. So let's go ahead and take a look. And I see what I did here. So down here in the get item action type, I checked if the item data is not null, or if the item model prefab is null, but I said not this. So I kind of did a little double negative here. So if I get rid of this, we want to see if the item data is null. In fact, I'm going to rewrite this because I kind of did a little bit of both. We're going to say if the item underscore data is null, or the prefab is null. Now, the reason we are checking the prefab, I guess I didn't state this, is that we need the prefab to be able to redrop the item into the world. But we're going to get to that in a little bit. So let's go ahead and run the game. And I'm going to run over here to this guy, click on him, and right-click. And I now have use and drop. Of course, neither of these do anything, but they do appear. In fact, let's see if any of the other interactables work. So this is an inspectable, so I can view or drop. Or if I come over here to the key, I can equip or drop. We have use, we have equip, and we have view. So far so good. Let's see if we can actually get some action to happen when we click these buttons. All right, so remember that the on item right clicked happens when we first press the button and we decide to build this context menu. So now we've clicked use or equip or whatever we're trying to click on, and now we need to perform an action. And that's what we're gonna do in this on context menu selected. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're going to get the slot ID. So variable slot underscore ID is equal to the context menu dot get meta, which gets the metadata, which is going to be the slot ID. So you'll notice right here, we set the slot ID in the metadata, and here we are getting it back. All right, so now that we know what slot ID we're working on, let's get the slot for that slot ID. So this is going to be an inventory slot, and this is just equal to inventory slots of slot underscore ID. And again, this is probably a super redundant if null check, but once again, we always want to make sure that our slot data is not null before we are doing anything. So if it is null, go ahead and return. And once again, we want to match the action type. So we're going to say get item action type, and we are still going to send the slot data to it. And I'm going to go ahead and copy these options because they will be identical. We have 3 different choices. If we have selected a consumable option, I'm going to go ahead and come here and write return so we can get rid of some of these red bars. My goodness, my typing has just begun to fail me as this tutorial has gone on. If we have a consumable object that we essentially want to eat, what we want to do is we need to match the ID. And remember that the ID is these options. So we have option 0 or we have option 1. So we're going to match the ID. And this ID in this instance was sent here. It is an argument for the on context menu selected. This is right here. So if we are using the object, we're consuming a health pack, let's say, we're going to send the number 0. And if we decide to drop it on the ground, we're going to send the number 1. So in the event that we want to use it, we're going to call a function we haven't written yet, but I'm going to call use collectible. And instead, I'm just going to, I wonder if it'll let me do this. Right, return for now, so we don't have the red bars. And otherwise, we are going to drop the collectible, and we'll return for now. And in fact, instead of return, I'm just going to go ahead and print out use thing. And then instead of this, we're going to say drop thing. So let's go ahead and run the game. And if I run over to my objects and I right click and hit use, we'll see that use thing printed out. So we'll work on the logic for using that stuff in a second, but let's go ahead and add the others in here. So they will also have 0 and 1 options. The difference is instead of using, they are going to view and equip respectively. So let's go ahead and fix some of these up real quick. So instead of use thing, we are going to say equip thing. Sorry about that. We need to copy the match ID as well. I was wondering why I was getting so many errors. I completely forgot. So we're going to match the ID in these instances as well. The only difference is, let's go ahead and clean this up here. The only difference is instead of use, we are going to say we are equipping this thing, or instead of use, we're going to say we're going to view this thing. So let's go ahead and run the game. If I grab this and I right click view, I see view thing. I grab the key, I hit equip, I equip thing, and then if I grab this, I use thing. So there we go. All right, now before we write the logic for what actually happens when we use or drop or equip, we have one more thing we need to take care of, and that is the double click. So essentially right now, we can either drop the item, which in the future we will drop it on the ground, or we will do option 1. So in my mind, if the player double clicks this, whatever it is, honestly, if the player double clicks it, it should do what the first value is. So for this health pack, we'll say, if I double click it, I should heal. If I double click the note, it should reappear in my hand. So essentially, we just need to do something very similar when we link up this on item double clicked method. So let's go ahead and do that. So obviously this is going to be very similar to the on item right clicked. So the first thing I'm going to do is copy these first 3 lines. We need to figure out what slot data we are working with when we do this. And let's go ahead and remove that underscore I did earlier. So we are told what slot we're clicking on, and so we get the item data for that given slot. And then obviously we need to match this, so we need to figure out what item type we are working with. And similar to the context menu, we're going to need all of our various action datas because we need to know, we need to do different things for the different actions. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, but get rid of the context menu and just hit return here for all of these. And so now, instead of return here, what's actually going to happen is we are going to do the same exact thing we do on option 0 for all of these. So right here, this will have a method call. So we just need to remember to do the same thing. So in this case, we are going to just print out the print use. We are going to print equip. We are going to print view. So something like this. If I go ahead and run the game and I grab a note and it's now in my inventory, if I double click, you'll see it says view thing. If I grab the key, we have equip thing. And then if we grab the item, we have use thing. So now we have the context menu built out and we're starting to be able to manipulate things in our inventory. In the next episode, we are going to finally parse out the rest of our information and start doing things with these objects that make them useful. So I hope to see you in the next one.